"We don't take kindly to outsiders around here, partner," said the weathered and sun-scorched face. "Ethan Park?" I said. But it couldn't be. "Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time." The man tipped that face up at me, and I saw his familiar dark eyes clearly under his dusty cowboy hat. "You're dead," I blurted. The cowboy stood and drained his root beer. "This outsider both Aaron yet dusty?" the bartender said, polishing a glass behind the gas station counter, which had been apparently repurposed as a saloon bar. There were still e-cigarettes and energy shots on the shelf behind him, gathering dust next to bottles of unlabeled amber liquor and oil lamps. "I'm not an outsider," I argued. "This is my hometown. I took your niece Savannah to prom, Mr. Kowalski." The bartender narrowed his eyes at me. "Name's Hank Rivers Sr. to you," he said, frowning under his huge white handlebar mustache. "Now, your money's as good as anyone else's, kid, but after you quench your thirst, you better take that steel horse you rode in on and ride along yonder, if you know what's good for ya." "Yonder?" I said. "What the hell is going on? This is Vermont. Is this a bit?" The 5 other cowboys in the gas station, who were all sitting around makeshift tables that had been hammered together from pieces of the quick-stop shelving, stopped their card game and glared at me. One of them reached for his sidearm. Ethan clapped his hand around my shoulder. "Settle down, boys," he said. "This here fella's kin, he just don't know it yet. Sit down, partner, and I'll tell my tale. I just came in to pay for gas. The thingy wasn't working outside," I said. "I'm actually late to my dad's memorial service right now." "Oh, don't worry about that, son. It's my dad's." "Sit down." I sat down. The plastic chair squeaked. Mr. Kowalski brought me a stein of root beer. "Folks, round here, we ain't afraid o' death no more," Ethan said. He lit his pipe. Red embers lit his dark eyes. "I met death. He's a 10-cent man." Ethan stared through the quick-stop windows past the gas pump and toward the horizon of Maplewood, Vermont. In 2017, Ethan Park had been crushed to death by a semi on his way home from Greenfield University. He was the first friend I ever lost. His death had hit me hard. We weren't as close as I was with some of my other friends, but we'd cut class a couple of times to vape by the creek and trade Pokemon cards. I didn't think he could grow facial hair, but he had a lot of it now. "You ever heard of Pet Sematary?" Ethan asked. "Yeah, I saw the movie," I said. "And the remake." "Well, turns out we got one of those." I stared incredulously. If I hadn't been at Ethan Park's funeral, I wouldn't have believed him. "Okay," I said. "Basically, it works just like in O.L. Steve King's account. You die, they put you in there, you come back wrong. First time they tried it with a person, it was Margaret Finch, the old school marm." "Oh no, Mrs. Finch died?" "It don't matter now," Ethan grunted. "Listen. They put the school marm in the cemetery, and the next day she was crawling back all full of murderous rage and such, same as the dogs and cats and fish, but worse. Spoutin' all kinds of vileness. So her husband shot her in the head." "Mr. Finch?" "Not before she cut him real good across the belly, though. The OL fella bled out right quick in his flower garden. So they buried both of them in the cemetery on account of the headstone already being paid for. Mr. Finch was my youth pastor. He always snuck us leftover communion bread and we'd eat it with peanut butter. I didn't even know he had a gun. So another day passed and, well, the two of them sprung back out of that dirt mound. Mr. Finch had come back wrong, just like his missus before him, all evil and such. But Mrs. Finch came back even wronger. Turns out there's a step down below evil. I'm talking downright, well, sorta like those red fellers we used to play at killin' as youngsters in that movin' picture game." "I don't know what the hell you're talking about, Ethan," I said. "Can you drop the cowboy accent?" Ethan glared at me. "Folks call me Dusty these days," he said. "Dusty Colton. Jeremiah Colton if you're a lawman." "I'm not gonna call you Jeremiah Colton," I said. "Nah, you'll call me Dusty like everyone else," he replied smoothly. "Resident Evil?" I said. The red zombies from Resident Evil, is that what you were talking about earlier?" Dusty shrugged. "Anyhow, the two of them went on a killin' spree round here. And I guess word got out about the cursed boneyard. Everyone and their mother, the ones who survived, hoped maybe their kin would be the exception to the rule. So more and more bodies went in the mound, and each of them came out as evil as the last. Except for Mrs. Finch, who came back worse for wear." "They put her back? Again?" "Well, see, the headstone had been paid for. So Mrs. Finch comes back and she's still spittin' hell's worst curses and Hank Aaron for a stab bin, but now she's also sort of a mad scientist sort. So she breaks into the hospital and starts grafting people's limbs together. Hang on. What the hell do you mean she's a mad scientist sort? I said. She was a math teacher? Well, see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. She's running around, hair all crazy, in a stolen lab coat, rantin' and ravin' about man playing God and splicing DNA and such, creating humanity's next evolution and such. So eventually the hospital staff knock her out and toss her back in the hole. Next time she came back, she was a 19th century venture capitalist named Theodore Whitaker IV who aimed to turn Maplewood into a factory town. Sorry, when did this all happen? Course, by this time, her husband was on his third resurrection too, so Whitaker was a force to be reckoned with the power of science behind him. The two of them did a bang-up job whipping this place into shape, corralling all the zombies in, throwing them in the hole, for science and to see if they could monetize it. Whitaker Mining and Scientific Enterprise unburied all the dead from the regular OL graveyard and tossed them in the hole, myself included. Then, when they came back, they put all those evil folks to work in the mines or in the lab. Now those mines were dangerous, of course, with all the coal dust and gas leaks. Whitaker didn't give a damn about safety. Lot of folks died. But they'd just bring him back. A couple weeks in, though, and there were about 20 Theodore Whitaker IVs and about 100 mad scientists running around, and it turns out Theo Whitaker works for no man. Each of them enlisted a squad of mad scientists and started their own enterprise. Wasn't too long before they started assassinating the competition. At this point, we'd all just gotten used to throwing people in the hole. Turns out, after Whitaker, you come back as kind of a Dracula. Now I won't go into all that business. You know Salem's Lot? No? Is that a gang? What about that their Catholic picture show up there on the Netflix, the one on the island put together by that Irish feller? Michael something. O'Flanagan. Mike Flanagan? Midnight Mass. Dusty smiled. There you go. It was all pretty much like that. I looked around at the gas station. Other than the restructuring that had transformed it from a regular quick-stop gas station into a cowboy saloon, it looked like this place had been through waves of disasters. There were bullet holes all over the ceiling, a massive rusty brown stain that someone had tried to scrub out with lye on the linoleum, burn marks on the walls with strange curling imprints of what looked like vines and needles. I'm guessing that everyone is vampires didn't last long, I said. It just ain't sustainable, Dusty shook his head. Vampires always think it's a smart idea to make everyone vampires, but see, it just don't work out. What do they eat? Turns out they don't. They starve. Then it's back in the hole. So things carried on like that for a while. At a certain point, we were just chucking people in there to see if there was an end point, how far this thing goes. Turns out, it goes evil, mindless zombie, mad scientist, Theodore Whitaker IV, master vampire, ghoul, skeleton warrior, skeleton jazz musician, man-eating plant, plant-eating man, or a vegan, I guess you'd call him, and a real son of a bitch, haunted ventriloquist, haunted dummy, haunted mummy, Christian family vlogger, Edna, evil cowboy, zombie cowboy, plant cowboy, Edna, again, then just regular OL, pure cowboy. What comes after cowboy? I asked. Dusty shook his head. Nothing, he said. It's just cowboy all the way down after that. The cowboys playing poker glanced up at me through clouds of tobacco smoke. I recognized some of these people from around town. Or rather, I recognized who they used to be. So, my dad's memorial, he's not really dead, is he? I said, a wave of hope and relief overwhelming me. I thought I'd have to say goodbye to him today. But he'll be back, won't he? Dusty only smiled sadly. You won't find fuel for your steel carriage, partner, said Dusty. I'll give you a ride to the cemetery. I followed Dusty out to the parking lot, where several horses were hitched. Where did you guys get all these horses? I asked. Oh, where there's cowpokes there's horses, he replied. That's a rule of nature. Dusty fed the horse an apple and stroked her mane before bidding me to climb on behind him. I held onto his waist, which was pretty weird for me because we were never close like that, and we galloped off up the highway toward the middle of town. We passed the elementary school, which had been covered in radiation warning signs and barbed wire. Then we passed the old diner, which had been converted to a one-room schoolhouse. Main Street's restaurants, law firms, and tattoo parlor had been replaced by a dry goods store, an ox stable, a wagoner, an apothecary. The barber was the same, but it looked like he also pulled teeth now. The park that I played in as a kid had been bulldozed to hell, and in its place was a brown dirt yard with scattered mounds and holes all clustered near the center. A new sign hung over the entrance on a wooden board, Lazarus Mound Cemetery. I guess we could have been more creative, Dusty said. But it's too late for couldas, I reckon. A group of cowboys, clad in black, stood over a dirt pile. They held their hats to their chest as the eulogy was read. Dusty followed me to my father's fresh grave. I dropped my bouquet of flowers on top of it. Family only, said one of the cowboys, glaring at me. Uncle Joe, it's me, I said. He twirled his goatee and grimaced, revealing a new gold tooth. It's Billy Rattler Hayes these days, he said. Didn't recognize ya, son. I suppose you want to say a few words? He gestured to the mound. Well, I would, I said, but I'm pretty sure he'll pop out halfway through. That's no way to talk about your poor dead father, said Great-Grandpa Carl, who I hadn't seen since 2005, when he died from a heart attack. Except he wasn't Great-Grandpa Carl. He was a short old man with a long rabbity mustache and 2 guns on either side. Let the kid grieve, Slim, said Rattler. The sun set on us. The resurrected cowboy versions of my family members became hungry and bored, and set up a small campfire where they heated up coffee and beans and spun some yarns. I asked questions about the cowboy economy and how it could sustain itself in this Vermont town that didn't have that many cows, and they responded by cussing me out and telling me to get lost, city boy. I said I couldn't be a city boy because I was from here, and they took away my beans. Finally, after about an hour, there was rustling from the mound. Here he comes, said Rattler. The dirt shuffled and ran down the side of the mound, a miniature landslide. Finally, a gloved hand emerged. Then an arm. A dirty, dusty head, crowned in a cowboy hat, burst from the pile, coughing. Well, butter my biscuits if it ain't the trickster just in time for dinner, said Slim, hands on his hips. My dad, who was now a dirt-covered cowboy named the Trickster, clicked his boots together to dislodge some stones from his spurs. Howdy. Miss me, fellas? The Trickster rasped, spitting pebbles into the fire. Dad, I said. The Trickster looked me over. They call me Vernon the Trickster McCoy now, my dad said. Why McCoy? I asked. Dad, what was wrong with Kim? Ain't a cowboy name, said Dad. A cowboy can't be Korean? Listen, kid, said the Trickster, clapping me on the arm. I've had a long day, and to be frank, I can't abide a city slicker like you before I get my brew. Gotta fill up on beans and coffee or I'll be skinner than a jazz skeleton in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. I watched my dad walk away toward the fire, greeting the other cowboys like old friends. It's like he didn't even recognize me, I said, broken. Dusty patted me on the shoulder. That ain't your father no more, partner, he said. Same as I ain't Ethan Park. What's the point of raising people from the dead if they're not themselves? I said. I reckon you've missed the essential theme of the Pet Cemetery premise, Dusty said. The point is it's a curse, not a blessing. To the living, at least. Mr. Stephen King said sometimes dead is better. And here in Maplewood, we reckon he was right. I heard a metal click. I turned around to see Dusty's shotgun pointed square at my forehead. Whoa, I said. The cowboys at the fire turned to watch with dim interest, including my own father. Ethan, hey, put that away. Dead is better. But you know what's best? Cowboy, he said. Cowboy is the best there is. Best there is, said the cowpokes around the fire in eerie unison. Wait, 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 there was a bang. My vision filled with red and then there was nothing. I saw and felt and heard nothing as Dusty watched my limp body fall backward into the hole. He kicked dirt over me casually. He holstered his weapon. He sat down around the fire next to the others. How many bullets you got, Dusty? Asked the Trickster through a mouthful of beans. Not enough to get him all the way through, Dusty replied, lighting his pipe. But enough to get him past Dracula for sure. That's the one you gotta watch out for, the Trickster said. I'll stand vigil with ya, partner. You go home, McCoy, wash that dust off, tend to your hurt. Be on the lookout for Edna. Word is she's still at large in places, Dusty said. She'll come around, said Slim. They always do. The campfire's embers rose up to the cloudy, dark sky. Dusty leaned back and tipped his hat low over his eyes. This town's got room for plenty more cowboys, he said. Around the fire, a dozen pairs of black, gleaming eyes turned toward the Lazarus mound, waiting. That was chilling, wasn't it? Now let's dive into our next terrifying tale. Dead wrong. I should start by telling you I'm a vampire. Not one of those beautiful, glittering creatures. No, I'm an ugly, snarling Nosferatu. My existence is a carefully guarded secret, for I cannot move freely among the living. My dark crypt is my home, my sanctuary, my prison. Time passes and I do not notice. The world has completely changed all around me, yet all I can do is eat and slumber in my coffin, unaware of the world above. The ancient castle that houses my resting place stands silent under the harsh light of day. Hunting grows ever more challenging as the world changes, and my grotesque visage, more corpse than human, makes subtlety a necessity. Unlike my alluring vampire kin who can glide through high society with ease, I cannot rely on charm. My survival depends on ingenuity, a skill honed long before death when I was a robber baron, fattening myself on the labor of those beneath me. Now, as then, I thrive by exploiting the weak, the desperate, and the invisible. The villagers, wary of my predations, have fortified their homes with crosses and lines of salt. Yet hunger is a powerful motivator, and I have devised a variety of methods to secure sustenance. My network of grave diggers and mortuary workers ensures a steady, if unremarkable, supply of misplaced bodies before burial. These same accomplices alert me to travelers passing through, their greed as reliable as the peasant bribes I once distributed to silence discontent. During stormy nights, I sabotage the monastery's bell tower, leaving travelers without its guiding chime. Lost in the fog, they stumble into the woods and, eventually, into my waiting embrace. For those who evade the forest, my human servants play their role. Disguised as highway robbers, they drive victims to my castle under the guise of offering sanctuary. It is an ironic tragedy, fleeing thieves only to face a true monster. Occasionally, I let my servants keep the spoils as a reminder that loyalty, even to a predator, has its rewards. The postal service, too, has become a boon. By diverting mail coaches onto treacherous mountain passes, I ensure a steady supply of stranded travelers. My servants, appearing as benevolent rescuers, bring these waylaid souls to me. In times of plague, I masquerade as a foreign doctor, my disfigurement explained away as scars from some distant battle. The sick and dying welcome me, blind to the danger in their desperation. They barely notice when another weak member of their household succumbs, and I leave them with promises of false hope. The orphanage has proven a particularly fruitful partnership. Its headmaster, drowning in gambling debts, sends me sickly children deemed too frail to survive the winter. The church accepts his explanations without question, never asking why so many of the bodies are unfit for viewing. It is a macabre echo of my mortal days, when a well-placed bribe could erase any inconvenient peasant or problem. Each method requires patience, calculation, and a mastery of deception. Unlike my handsome kin who dance effortlessly through glittering ballrooms, I rely on schemes born of necessity. Yet, there is a satisfaction in this careful manipulation, a predator's pride in its perfected hunt. Eternity grants me the luxury of time to adapt and refine my methods, even as superstition and science shape the world above. Perhaps my hideousness is a blessing in disguise. Who would suspect the ghoulish outcast, too monstrous for polite society, of orchestrating such misfortunes? In a world obsessed with appearances, invisibility can be a most useful tool. Suddenly, the peace is shattered by the arrival of 3 vampire hunters. First through the door is a weathered mountain of a man whose monastery-trained muscles strain against his black cassock. A leather bandolier crosses his chest, laden with wooden stakes and glass vials of holy water. Behind him slinks a ghoulishly thin scholar whose wire-rimmed spectacles catch the lamplight as he consults a tome of vampire lore clutched in his ink-stained hands. Bringing up the rear is a woman, her silver-streaked black hair pulled tight beneath a man's hunting cap. She holds a crossbow loaded with blessed bolts held ready in calloused hands. Their footsteps echo through the halls as they make their way deeper into the castle's bowels, closer to my sanctuary. The crypt door creaks open, and I hear their hushed voices as they approach my coffin. With a grunt of effort, they pry open the lid, exposing my corpse-like form to the dim light of their lanterns. My gray, mottled skin stretches tight across my skull, lipless mouth revealing yellowed fangs even in repose. What follows is a debate that would chill the blood of any living being, a discussion on how best to destroy me. "We need to behead it first," one hunter whispers urgently, gripping a silver-hilted blade. "Then stake it to the coffin so it can't rise." "You're a fool," snarls another, his weathered face twisted with scorn. "The head must remain attached, how else will the holy wafers work? We need to fill its mouth while it's still whole." "Both of you know nothing," cuts in a third, her scarred hands tightening around a crossbow. "In my village we learned the hard way. The only sure method is burial at a crossroads. The constant traffic keeps the ground compacted, traps them forever." "Your village?" scoffs a younger hunter, striking flint against steel. "The same one that lost 3 families last winter to a fledgling vampire? No, fire is the only way. We burn it to ashes and scatter them in the river's current." "The river?" A sharp voice rises from the back of the group. "So it can seep into the water table? Poison the wells? Have you learned nothing from the Prague incident?" The oldest among them pushes through the arguing group, his beard streaked with gray. "In 60 years of hunting, I've seen them rise from fire, water, and consecrated ground alike. There's only one sure way: bury them face down." Face down? Several voices clash in disbelief. The elder nods grimly. When they wake, driven by unholy hunger, they'll dig downward instead of up. By the time they realize their mistake, the sun will have long since found them. As they argue, their voices grow louder, echoing through the crypt. Unbeknownst to them, their noise has attracted attention, my brethren, other vampires hidden in the shadows, silently creeping up behind the oblivious hunters. Just as the debate reaches its peak, I sit up in my coffin, fully awake and very much undead. The hunters freeze, terror etched on their faces as they realize their fatal mistake. From the shadows emerge my brethren. Vladislav, once a Transylvanian prince, his aristocratic bearing unmarred by the centuries of decay that have left his flesh a tapestry of desiccated patches and exposed sinew. Behind him glides Sister Agatha, a former nun whose transformation twisted her features into something vulpine and cruel, her habit now a rotting shroud that trails black ichor. Finally, there's the sculptor, as we call him. None know his true name or age, but his patchwork body bears the stitched-together features of his favorite victims, a grotesque collage of stolen beauty. The third hunter turns to me and brandishes a crucifix, but it's too late. With one swipe of my elongated, razor-sharp claws, I completely remove the woman's head. A fountain of blood springs forth from her torso as her holy water spills uselessly across the ground. Vladislav descends upon the cleric with precision, his movements as elegant as any court dance as he brutally tears out the priest's throat. Sister Agatha takes special delight in the academic, perhaps remembering her own days of scholarly pursuit. She lets him almost reach the door before pouncing, her unnaturally wide jaws unhinging to deliver the fatal bite. As the last echoes of combat fade away, we gather in the great hall, our figures casting no reflections in the tarnished mirrors. The remnants of our unwelcome visitors cool on the flagstones below as we debate how to prevent future intrusions. "We should dig a moat," hisses Vladislav, his noble bearing unchanged despite the fresh blood staining his elaborate waistcoat. "Fill it with things that hunger as we do. I know of a merchant in Vienna who trades in crocodiles. The beasts could feast on trespassers during daylight hours." Sister Agatha's laugh echoes through the chamber, a sound like breaking glass. "Such exotic measures are unnecessary, my prince." Her twisted fingers gesture at the bloody mess below. "We need more living servants. Proper ones, bound by blood and gold. Guards during daylight, eyes in the village, tongues in the taverns to warn us of approaching threats." Both fine suggestions, the sculptor interrupts, adjusting the stitching at his neck where his latest acquired feature is still settling into place, "but I favor more artistic measures." He extends a mismatched arm toward the ceiling. "Let us create a labyrinth. I've seen such works in France. False passages, trapdoors, rooms that flood with the pull of a lever. We could make the very architecture our weapon." From my position by the hearth, I watch as centuries of personality clash and combine. The castle itself already holds many secrets, I remind them, running a claw along the ancient stones. Perhaps we should simply learn to use what we have. The dungeons connect to natural caves that run for miles. We could seed them with coffins, create multiple layers. Sister Agatha's vulpine features twist in contemplation. We could cultivate the grounds as well. I remember from my mortal days how certain plants can be quite deadly. Nightshade, wolfsbane, thorny brambles to snag and tear. Nature itself could be our guardian. What we need, Vladislav declares with aristocratic certainty, is to spread confusion among our enemies. He paces the chamber, his decaying fingers tracing patterns in the air. "Let us plant false weaknesses. If they believe silver is our bane instead of wood, let them waste time gathering amulets and bullets that will do nothing. If they think running water bars our path, let them exhaust themselves hauling holy water when simple stakes would serve." The sculptor nods, his patchwork face shifting in the candlelight. "And we should vary our resting places. Never sleep in the same coffin twice in a fortnight. They cannot drive a stake through our hearts if they cannot find them." As we debate, the first hints of dawn begin to creep across the sky. I raise my hand for silence and my brethren still themselves. I turn to face them fully, my lipless mouth stretching in what passes for a smile. We have survived centuries of persecution. We shall adapt as we always have. We retreat to our coffins as the sun threatens the horizon, leaving behind the cooling corpses of our would-be executioners. Tomorrow night we begin our work. The hunters will come again, they always do. But next time we will be ready. After all, what is time to the undead? We have eternity to perfect our defenses, and unlike our prey, we need only succeed every time. They need only fail once. If you thought that was scary, wait until you hear this next story. Stay ignorant, my friends. We as a human race are obsessed with knowledge. The getting, using, and sharing of information we find relevant or interesting or necessary. Well, you have heard the phrase ignorance is bliss, right? That's not at all a false statement. There is a gargantuan difference in learning a fun fact or researching a term paper opposed to searching for answers you could certainly live without, as they change nothing and simply make the world a darker place for you. Problem is, sometimes it is impossible to tell between the two before it's too late. I have recently moved into a new apartment. It's very old and kind of musty and has required a lot of TLC from yours truly. That is not a problem for me at all, but since it is an old apartment, it vehemently set my curiosity in motion. What cool quirks or secrets might this quiet, old apartment be harboring? Naturally, I went exploring. The usual places, the storage unit and the utility closet, were a bust. No dead bodies hiding anywhere. No one-of-a-kind antiques worth $1 million gazillion. Just a mostly empty, dusty storage unit and a junk-filled, drafty utility closet. Upon my in-depth walkthrough of the bedrooms, there are 3, living room and study. I turned up equally boring results. Oddly enough, it was the bathroom that provided my first piece of information that I never needed. After thoroughly checking through the cabinets and the vents, around shelves and such, I casually opened the medicine cabinet expecting to simply see the inside of an empty medicine cabinet, and instead found a yellow legal-sized envelope quietly waiting on the bottom shelf, as if it was a bar of soap, waiting to be found. There were no markings on the envelope. It was 100% dry. The lip wasn't sealed, simply tucked down into the interior of the envelope. I could tell it contained pictures. Having no idea why anyone would stick pictures in a medicine cabinet, I got excited. It made 0 sense and therefore might actually be something. Be careful what you wish for. That was the kind of moment I was having. I just didn't know it yet. I removed the envelope from its medicine cabinet prison and retreated to the living room, where I plopped into my only piece of furniture. I started looking through the photos and was immediately disappointed. Though it looked like a happy family, that's all I saw, just a happy family. Nothing exciting or interesting. After looking through the whole envelope, I smiled, acknowledged how sweet the family appeared, and went to order takeout and had a few sodas while I was waiting. After I ate, in my slightly tired state, I decided to look through the pictures again. Here is where I end up possessing the second piece of information that I don't need. This time when I looked, something caught my attention. Perhaps the fatigue helped to blur my vision, but it seemed in every single picture, I could locate a pale figure, about the size of an average to slightly short woman and clearly roughly in the shape of one, looming off to the side or in a corner somewhere. It was always there. This kind of freaked me out and prompted me to look around the apartment. It could have been a glare, but that is a very inconsistent glare, seeing as it would have had to keep jumping around to different parts of the camera lens, not to mention its uncanny likeness to the human female figure. However, after an extensive search, I still came out empty-handed, and so I stopped searching. My paranoia was still running pretty rampant though. So that night, when I went to bed, I set up my voice recorder on the nightstand, just to hear. Then I took my melatonin, and it still took a long time, but eventually I finally fell asleep. Upon waking up in the morning, I immediately checked the recording on the device. Here, I made my third and most devastating mistake of obtaining information. What I heard was that shadowy figure in my room, first whispering in the corner, then on the side of my bed, for the hours leading up to 2 a.m. At 2 a.m. the figure seemed to move directly beside my bed and stop. That is when I sat straight up out of a dead sleep, gasping, then stood up, frowned the most disturbed frown I've ever seen on myself, and got dressed. I left, and at 6 a.m. I returned, covered in mud. Then I walked out of my room again, presumably to the shower, since I came back in clean and back in my night clothes. Then I climbed back into bed, and the moment my eyes closed, I could suddenly hear that shadowy figure back in the corner of my room. It's 9 a.m. and I only woke an hour ago. At least that's what I remember. I just looked for the clothes I had on in the recording. They weren't in my room or the bathroom anywhere, so I checked in the balcony, as that would be the next logical place. That's where I found them, soaking in a bucket in detergent, all, whether dark or not, almost completely gray now and mostly mud-free. Trust me, stay ignorant, my friends.